And we're continuing with the 16th chapter of the fourth part of Silver on the Tree by Susan Cooper. The name of the part is The Midsummer Tree, and the name of the chapter is Sunrise. Barney has been captured by the White Rider, although Will and Bran had just returned from the Lost Land to show the recovered sword to the Drew children. They are now after Barney and the White Rider. Nothing took shape in Barney's mind but the whirling sense of speed, and then a dim, growing awareness of restraint, of his hands tied before him, and a bandage over his eyes, then rough hands removing him, prodding him forward, to stumble over stony ground. Once he fell and cried out as his knee hit a rock. Voices spoke impatiently in a strange guttural tongue, and after that a guiding hand was slipped beneath his arm. He heard military-sounding commands, and the walking grew smoother. Doors opened and closed, and then he was stopped, and the covering pulled from his eyes, and Barney, blinking, found himself being studied by a weather-beaten, dark-bearded face, with bright dark eyes, wise eyes, deep-set, that reminded him of Merriman. The man was leaning against a heavy wooden table. He wore trousers and jerkin of leather over a thick woolen shirt. Still gazing at Barney, eyes flicking from his face to his clothes and back again, he said something curtly in a guttural speech. "I don't understand," Barney said. The man's face hardened a little. "English, indeed," he said. "The voice to match the hair. Have they reached such a pass that they must use children now as spies?" Barney said nothing, since he felt he was spying indeed, peeping out of the corners of his eye to discover where he might be. It was a low, dark room with wooden walls and floor and beamed roof. Through a window he glimpsed outer walls of gray stone. Men who seemed to be soldiers stood grouped around. They wore only a kind of leather and armor over rough clothes, but each had a knife at his belt, and some carried bows as tall as themselves. They were looking at him with hostility, some with open hatred. Barney shivered suddenly in fear at the sight of one man's hand playing restlessly with his knife. He looked up desperately at the dark-eyed man. "I am not a spy, truly. I don't even know where I am. I was kidnapped." "Kidnapped?" The man frowned, uncomprehending. "Stolen, carried off." The dark eyes grew colder. "Stolen to be brought to my stronghold, in the one part of Wales where no Englishman, even of my allies, dares to set foot. The Marcher lords are foolish and do many stupid things in their rivalries, but none is quite as stupid as that. Try again, boy, if you wish to save your life. I can see no reason yet why I should not listen to my men, who are anxious to hang you by the neck in the next 5 minutes outside that door." Barney's throat was dry. He could scarcely swallow. He said again, whispering, "I am not a spy." From the shadows behind the leader, the man with the knife said something roughly, contemptuously, but another laid a hand on his arm and stepped forward, speaking a few soft words, an old man with a heavily wrinkled brown face and wisping white hair and beard. He was looking closely at Barney. Suddenly another soldier came hurrying into the room and spoke rapidly in a guttural tongue. The bearded leader let out an angry exclamation. He said a few brief words to the old man, nodding in Barney's direction, then swung, preoccupied, out of the room, with men close around him. Only 2 soldiers remained, guarding the door. "And where were you stolen from, boy?" the old man's voice. "And where were you stolen from, boy?" The old man's voice was soft and lisping with a heavy accent. Barney said miserably, From a long way away." Bright eyes watched him skeptically through the wrinkles. "I am Iolo Gotch, Bard the Prince. I know him well, boy. He has had bad news, and it will not help his mood when he comes back. I advise you to tell him the truth." "The Prince?" Barney said. The old man looked at him oddly, as if Barney were questioning the title. "Orlan Gwendover," he said with chilly pride. "Prince indeed. Owen ap Gruffydd, Lord of Gindewaldi and Sitiach. Yes, good. And Griffin Earth, And now in the great rebellion proclaimed Prince of Wales, and all Wales is with him against the English, and Henry Plantagenet cannot catch him, nor hold even his English castles here, or the towns that are plastered to call English boroughs, or the towns that are pleased to call English boroughs. All Wales is rising, a lilt came into his voice as if he were singing, and the farmers have sold their cattle to buy arms, and the mothers have sent their sons to the mountains to join Owain. The Welshmen who work in England have come home, bringing English weapons with them, and the Welsh scholars at Oxford and Cambridge have left their books to join Owain. And we are winning. Wales has a leader again, and Englishmen will no longer own Welsh lands and despise and rule us from Westminster. For Owain ap Gruffydd will lead us to set ourselves free. Barney listened helplessly to the passion in the frail voice, his uneasiness growing. He felt very lonely and small. The door crashed open, and Glyfter was there, again with his men, scowling silent. He glanced from Barney to Iolo Gotch. The old man shrugged. "Listen to me now, boy," said Glyfter, his dark, beaded face grim. "There is a comet in the sky these nights to show my coming triumph, and on that sign I shall ride. Nothing shall stop me, nothing, least of all the thought of tearing apart a spy from King Henry who refuses to tell us of his sending." His voice rose a little, quivering with control. "I have just heard that a new English army is camped on the other side of Welshpool. You have 1 minute remaining to tell me who sent you into Wales and whether that army knows I am here." Only one thought sang through the fear loud in Barney's head now. "He may belong to the dark. Don't talk. Don't tell him who you are," he said, choking. "No," the man shrugged. "Very well. I have sent to speak once more with the one who brought you to me, the light-voiced one from Twyn, with the white horse, and after that—" He broke off, staring at the door, and as Barney turned his head, the whirling seemed to be back, the speed and the turning. And turning, Will and Bran, each holding the gleaming crystal sword, found themselves suddenly still now. A heavy wooden door before them burst open, and inside a low-roofed dark room they saw a group of armed men. One stood separate, a dark bearded man with an air of authority, and before him was Barney, standing very still and tight-faced. Several of the men lunged forward in shouting confusion, and the bearded one snapped one sharp word, and they fell back instantly like startled dogs, swift but reluctant, looking at their leader with an astonishment that was almost suspicion. Will's senses, as an old one, were vibrating like a harp string. He stared at the man with the beard, and the man stared back for a moment, and then gradually the grim lines of his face were relaxing, changing, becoming a smile. An unspoken greeting in the old speech came into Will's mind, and aloud the man said in halting English, "You are come to a wild time. Sign-seeker, but welcome, if my men do not take you for another English informer such as we have here." "Will," Barney said huskily, "he keeps telling me I'm a spy and they want to kill me. Do you know him?" Will said slowly, "Greetings, Owain Glyfter, the greatest Welshman of all." Bran was gazing in awe at the bearded man, the only one ever to unite Wales against the English, through all the quarreling and feuding. Glyfter was looking at him with narrowed eyes. "But you... He glanced uncertainly at Will's blank, expressionless face, and shook his head crossly. "Ah, no, nonsense. No place for dreams in my head, with the last and hardest battle waiting us, and the bloody English coming up like ants in spring." He turned to Will, waving a hand at Barney. "Is the boy with you, old one?" "Yes," Will said. "That explains much," Glyndor said, "but not his stupidity in failing to tell me so." Barney said defensively, "How was I to know you weren't part of the dark?" The Welshman put back his head with a curt, incredulous laugh, and then straightened, looking with something like respect. Well, true, not badly done. Sasbach. Take him now, sign-seeker. He reached out one strong arm and propelled Barney backwards, as if he had been a toy. And go away, and go about your purposes in my land in peace, and I will give you any support you need. There will be great need, Will said grimly, if it is not already too late. He pointed to the sword that Bran was already holding out before him in wonder and alarm. The blade was flickering again with blue light, as it had done at the destruction of the Lost Land, as it had done at the rushing descent of the dark that had carried Barney away. Glifter said abruptly, The dark, but this is my stronghold. There can be none of the dark here. There are many, said a soft voice at the door, and by right, since you let the first of them in. Dowl! Glifter sprang upright, instinct pulling a dagger from his belt, for in the doorway between the two armed men, frozen helplessly out of movement, stood the White Rider, a robed figure with eyes and teeth gleaming out of the shadows of the white hood. You sent for me, Owain of Gwynedd, the rider said. Sent for you. The light-voiced one from Twihyn with the white horse, the White Rider said, the White Rider mockingly, whom your men welcome so warmly for the gift of a spying English boy, the voice hardened, and who claims in return now another boy of more significance, and with him the sword he carries. You have no claim over me, Bran said with contempt. The sword brings me into my power and out of your reach, in this time or any other. Owain Glyftor looked at Bran, and Will, and back at Bran. At the white hair and the pale face with its tawny eyes, and the sword blade flickering with blue flame. The sword is two-edged, the rider said. Bran said, the sword belongs to the light. The sword belongs to no one. It is in the possession of the light only. Its power is the power of the old magic that made it. Made it at the command of the light, Will said. And yet also the tomb of every hope, said the rider, softly masked still by his white hood. Do you not remember, old one? It was written, and there was no word as to whose hope should be entombed. But they should be your own, Owain Glyfter said suddenly, and he snapped some words in Welsh at it to his men and sprang toward the back wall of the room. Reaching for something, soldiers flung themselves at the white-robed form of the rider. None managed to touch him. They fell sideways, backwards, colliding with some hard, invisible wall, and the rider lunged forward at Bran. But Bran swept the sword Arias to and fro before him, as if riding in the air, and the sword left a sheet of blue flame hanging, and the rider fell back with a shriek. Even as he moved, he seemed to change, to multiply, as if suddenly there were a crowd with him. But Owain was calling urgently, and Will dared not wait to see, but followed the rest through the doorway they had not seen before. The leather-clad Welsh soldiers were pushing them on the backs of a string of sturdy grey mountain ponies, and past slate cliffs and stone walls, through the green lanes they trotted swiftly and silently, where Owain led. The roar and confusion of the dark rose behind them, and with it the clash of swords and the song of arrows from long bows, and voices shouting in English as well as Welsh. Will said nothing, but he knew that another battle, as well as their own, was beginning there. The reason for the Dark's choice of this time for their new hostage, and that Owain was not in the place where he must have ached to be. And we will pause there.